Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com for all things Vespa. Look us up on the web, ScooterWest.com. So a few weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a short video of all these new Cuppini racks, specifically the one with the lights on the front. I think that's pretty cool. Comes in chrome and black. Probably an all matte black scooter. The black rack would be a little bit better, but got the chrome one, kind of adds for some contrast. Rack's pretty simple to install. The electrical, it's a little bit more work, so I'm going to show you how to simply get the lights to do something just like that. So adds for extra light. I think it's a pretty cool look. Let's get started. So as you can see, the complete glove box on this 2026 Vespa GTS 310 Super Sport, it's all removed. I would suggest going to one of my prior videos. I've taken the glove box off on pretty much every model of modern Vespa. So you may want to go through one of my prior videos on dismantling the glove box, such as I'll have a horn video. There's a lot of videos where I take the glove box apart. So unfortunately, the newer the Vespa GTS is, the more difficult it is to remove the glove box. So the newer they get, more electronic modules, the body has tighter seams and fitment, things interfere a little bit. As you can see, I removed the handlebar cover. I didn't disconnect any of the wiring because I do want to test everything. If you have too many connectors disconnected on any of these modern Vespas, you could have some issues and trigger like a check engine light or something. So best is to leave everything all connected when you prepare the scooter for the wiring of these lights. So don't be alarmed by all this stuff, or you're going to be tampering with the wiring. The nice thing about all these modern auxiliary lights, they're LED and they draw very, very little power. It's not like the old days where you have two old school hella halogen lights and the scooter couldn't even make enough power to power those lights. These new modern lights, they draw very, very little power, and pretty simple to do the wiring. So first of all, let's set ourselves up for success. Some basic tools you'll need for like automotive style electrical. I have a nicer quality Molex quick connect. Any of these crimp connectors, don't need something this fancy, but this is definitely the nicer tool for crimping connections. And you'll need kind of a combo tool like this with wire strippers, got integrated wire cutter. And these also would do the crimps just like that. Moving on to the items needed. Pretty important to have a fuse holder. You don't want to just be tapping into circuits on the scooter willy-nilly, cause more issues. So I just have a basic blade fuse holder. We have these on the Scooter West web store. I think it's fuse holder 1, if I recall. Kind of a light duty fuse holder. And then you would want to add a low current fuse. So all our wiring's like 18 gauge. The LEDs draw more like 3 amps, 2 amps at the most, but I'm going to protect everything with a 7.5 amp fuse, and that's more than adequate. Want to have the means to turn them on and off, and we're going to wire them so that you can only turn them on when the ignition of the scooter's on. The simplest style button you can find. These work really well. They're a little harder to find, but you could search online, find them. It's a little push on, push off, and it has a nice little rubber cap, keeps it water resistant. Nice and discreet to install these because all you do is drill a simple little hole. It's not some silly looking toggle switch as you find at your local O'Reilly's or AutoZone. Simple with 2 wires. You could use any other kind of switch, a toggle switch, whatever you want. Don't really need a light because you're turning on lights. You could buy lighted switches, but they need 1 extra connection. So not really necessary, just a basic switch. I think this can handle up to 10 amps, so we're totally fine on the current rating for that. For wire, just some regular automotive grade wiring. So don't need to get really thick stuff, just 18 gauge. I got red and black right here. And as you can see, an assortment of crimp terminals. So typically the red terminals are for crimping 16 gauge or higher number, smaller wire. So typically use the red ones. The blue ones, we're gonna pair up the wires on the front headlights. So those are typically for, I think 14 or 16 gauge if I recall. And I don't really wanna mess with the wiring on the scooter, but we do need to make one tap on the scooter. I don't recommend using a Scotch lock, but you could find the posi tap, and this is a little bit larger one. And it's what it has, and there's a silver plated needle that will puncture the insulation of the wire. Everything behind the glove box stays pretty dry, but if you do want to put silicone dielectric grease on these, you can certainly do that as well, protect the wiring and the connection. We're going to tap into a circuit where it just only turns on when you turn ignition on. All right, and the last thing, a little bit of tubing or zip ties. So it's basic wiring stuff for doing automotive basic wiring tasks. So as you see, the whole glove box all apart. You have the fuse holder right here. And obviously on a newer one, it's much more complicated, relays and such. But going back for the last 25 years of Vespas, they pretty much have two different colors. The color you're gonna be looking for is the thick orange wire, and that is ignition switch. So pretty much whenever I turn the ignition on, these orange wires go live. You don't want to tap any of these protected circuits. If you want something powered all the time, it'd be these much larger red wires, but we're not going to mess with those. So that's going to be our positive connection. It's going to go to the fuse holder first. You can find that orange wire in other parts of the harness as well, but your best bet is always at the fuse holder. There's other fuse holders throughout the scooter as well, but look at the main fuse holder inside the glove box, and pretty much any of the modern Vespa models, you'll find that big thick orange wire. For a ground connection, two ways you can go about it. The safest way to make a ground connection is these are negative ground frame, and they have a nice frame ground right here for the ABS pump. So we're gonna put a little ring terminal. It looks like that, along with that other large ground connection. So that's gonna be always the easiest spot to add a ground versus tapping into another wire. When I look at things like this running light, I see a black wire. They typically use black wires for ground connection. There's a black wire right here. Probably don't really wanna be tapping into any of the wires for the keyless module, because that's pretty critical for the scooter to turn on and start. Sometimes you find auxiliary connections that have black wire on them as well, like such as this alarm connector. There's a black wire right here. Actually, that white wire becomes live, you know, when you turn the ignition on, but it's behind a fuse, so I wouldn't recommend using that. That is also another option, but we're going to use that ground lug right off the frame. All right, so we'll start with the wiring that would go to the auxiliary lights up front. And the nice thing is you got those 3 chevrons on the horn cover, so make a nice little skinny harness that will just route right through those little grill inlets that are open to the outside world. So take a little tubing of some sort. You can even use heat shrink tubing. If you don't have that, you probably wrap it with electrical tape. It's a little messier. This definitely looks a little more professional. So I have a pair of wires going through that tubing right there. And I'm gonna go ahead and strip probably about a 1/4 inch off each one of these wires right here. And sometimes the key is give it a rotate and then give it a pull. And you don't want to use too small of a stripper, because you might take some of the strands out with it. Give them a nice little pre-twist. And what I'm going to use is a pair of blade, 1/4 inch quick connect blade terminals, because they're nice and skinny. Now I want to have connections I can remove. So say I need to remove the rack. So that's the best way to go about this. So we'll go ahead and crimp. This nice fancy crimper is got a ratcheting mechanism. It makes a very, very tight crimp. So don't want to over crimp them, because that actually cuts the wires. So it's something you don't want to do. We'll do the same for our negative. So a nice little set of wires will go to our lights, and we'll kind of route it from the front. So right now, I don't have the horn cover on. But we'll go ahead and prepare the rack, kind of get our distance set. So I have a pair of lights on these Cuppini racks. And I went ahead and stripped the wires. These are, again, stranded wires. They're a little bit smaller, I think about 20 gauge. And I'm gonna go ahead and twist both the reds together and the blacks together. Could use some tubing, kind of clean the wiring up if you want. Like, just put a little pieces over the wiring, just to clean up the wires, make them look a little nicer. So right over the red, but I still see that it's a red, so no issues there. This is where I'm going to use a little bit larger crimp terminal, so the blue, because you got a pair of wires in there. Probably could still use a red. And again, crimpers like these ratcheting ones are really nice because they always give you a repeatable good crimp every time. Make sure it's tight, and do the same for the negative connection as well. Of course, if you want to get fancy, you could get a nice little small connection. It's got to be pretty small because you do want to route it through that horn cover. But the quick connects make for a nice little easy do-it-yourself connection here. If you are going to use a crimper like this, you look for the one that says insulated, because they do have this plastic insulation on there, and you just squeeze rather tight and always check your connection, give it a tug. If it pulls off, you're gonna have to try again. So, and just to mock up our connections, we'll go ahead and plug the red into here and vice versa. And maybe even a good idea, put a little tubing over this, wrap that up, but that's something we'll do later. The nice thing is you can push this right through the horn grill so you don't see this mess of terminals. All you see is the black wires, so that's something we'll do when we assemble the scooter. So I have the pair of flying wires right here. You can always do a little test. Strip the ends, kind of test the wiring along the process of installing, something like the battery that's in your scooter. I just have a battery here. Let's see if it lights up. I see both of them lighting up, so we're all set there. Typically with these LEDs, if you reverse the polarity, they're just not going to light up. It's not going to hurt anything. We'll go ahead and mock up the rack so we kind of get the lengths correct, and I'm going to go ahead and route that through right above where the horn is. There's a nice opening up front. And one of the more important things to keep in mind is you don't want to run any of the wiring where you have wires that move around. So keep that in mind. You want to leave enough slack so you can pull it out and make the connection from outside and never have to take this whole forbidden glove box apart again. We'll start with a ground connection. Probably a little longer than I need it to be, so I could, trim it a little shorter. Take the ring terminal. This is a 1/4-inch ring terminal, which works perfect for a 6mm fastener. And right behind here is our ground connections. So there's another stud up top, but I won't really mess with that one because it does still have a little paint on it. You could grind some of the paint off very carefully and use that as a ground, or just double check it. Put a new nut on, or you can remove that existing nut and do that. Say you want to use that new stud up there for a new ground. So I have the crimp terminal with the ring terminal, and I'm going to use specifically a flange nut with a little serration. That's going to be your best kind of nut to make a good positive ground connection, because it kind of bites into the terminal and will lock in place. And if you have earlier model GTS, it may be occupied with a bracket here, these two ring terminals for a turn signal flasher. So, but still it makes for a good spot to make a ground connection up at the front. You could use that same connection for heated grips. You know, the horn, I'll have a video on doing the horn. And just make sure it's tight. And again, we can kind of check our work. Ironically, since the battery's in here, I'm just gonna back probe the lights right into one of these red wires right here. You can kind of see the terminal, and both of them are coming on, so it shows we got a good ground connection. In an ideal spot, we may put the button. There's not really much area, but we could make some area. I could drill a hole and sneak this nice little button right off to the side. You can open up the glove box, hide the button, put it wherever you want. I prefer not to want to drill in any parts of the painted plastic, but you know, more like something like these knee pads that are inexpensive and they're unpainted, a nice clean part to drill. So we're gonna make a splice that goes from our fuse holder to the switch. And it might be more wire than we need. It may be ideal to kind of figure out your lengths. You wanna have enough length where when I put the glove box together, you can still pull it away and disconnect everything like all the other existing wiring systems. So I got the fuse holder, one end, and the switch, the other end. This is a butt splice. You could get a little more professional about it and actually solder wires. Cool thing about these nice crimpers, they kind of seal off the ends of these terminals right here. And then the last splice we'll make is to this red wire. And again, it's a little bit longer I probably need. Other way you can work these is with the ratchet. It kind of holds it in place. And then push the wire in. Make sure it's pushed in all the way, and then go ahead and crimp. And then the last connection we're going to make is for the fuse holder. It's going to be off one of these orange loops right here. So this is where something like a posi tap comes in handy. A lot better than the Scotch locks. You know, that's the real common ones you find at an auto parts store that tend to sometimes cut the filaments of the wire. This is a little less intrusive on the wiring. It's got the needle, and you pretty much straddle it with that little end, and then find this just like that. And you can find them on our Scooter West web store. It's EC1T is the Scooter West part number. And then you open this little ferrule right here. Give this a couple little twists. Push that in. Go ahead and tighten it down. So just like that. Give it a tug, make sure it doesn't pull out. And the thing with having too long of wires, you don't want them going into the fan. We'll tidy things up. We could kind of twist things. You can even put electrical tape over the wiring. Kind of have the fuse holder and all this stuff will zip tied along the existing wiring harness, but you know, we'll need a little bit of flying extra length for this little switch right here. So we're gonna go ahead and test this. have everything hooked up right here, turn the ignition on, and then I'll push the button. And you can turn it on or off. The cool thing is you turn the ignition off and the lights turn off too. They're not gonna stay on. If you wired it to this heavy gauge red wire, it's gonna stay on all the time, and that's not the best scenario. So again, you could use just like they did from the factory. You'd wrap 1 or 2 turns of electrical tape, kind of have it all tidied along with the original wiring, and just like that. So, you know, this is all kind of floating with the original wiring, have a couple zip ties holding it, and then I'll have the little button externally mounted to the side here. So that's how I'll set that up. Obviously, there's a whole task of putting the whole glove box all back together, but let me show you how it's all set up in the front. All right, so we're on the front of the scooter. Hypothetically, we have the whole glove box all together, but just these pair of wires, so we know they're working. And the cool thing is you can just route them right through. It's just enough slack where I have it where route it right through the grill right here. Install the whole horn cover right there, and I could just barely see the colors. Hang the rack on here. Probably a black rack would have been a little more ideal for this. And we have the pair of wires. So make sure you don't drop the rack down the back of the scooter. Take your red, connect that, and then the black. So the cool thing about having the wiring through these little horn grills, you see that little ugliness? All you do is have just a tiny bit of slack on that wire. Make sure you push it off to the side, because sometimes if it touches the horn, it will make kind of a funny noise. So you may have to like reroute it, but nice and tidy in there. You can even use zip ties and tidy everything up even a little bit more. So the rack's not just gonna hang out on its own like this. A couple things you wanna do. So you have these pair of suction cups. Sometimes you wanna get the ideal position, give them a little twist so they kind of sit pretty square. Make sure the distance here is good. Included with the rack is 2 different lengths, or 2 different styles of these. So if you have a 2019 and earlier, you're going to use a shorter one because they don't have such a bulbous front leg shield. But starting in 2020, they re-engineered and redesigned the leg shield. You're going to use this much longer one. So typically you want to turn the steering off to the side. You're going to use the little bit longer one right here. And you kind of can feel right where the steering column comes through. There's that hook on the rack. So maybe best to have the wiring on the outside of this little bracket here, but they put like tubing on here to protect it, and it includes a bolt and this special type of nut that drops into the hole that's on the rack. So just like that. Get that started. And in some cases you may want to find a little bit shorter screw too, or put some washers on the screw, because I have found that the screw that's with it is a little on the long side. Cool thing about this special nut, make sure it's centered, is you can use that little Allen key to tighten it down on the top. So we'll go ahead and hold the bolt, and then from the top you can use an Allen key and tighten this down. If you find it's a little bit too loose, you may want to add some washers. Right now it's hanging in there, but not just crank so tight that it's you know, this bracket's really crushing into the horn cover. It's just there to keep it from bouncing off. You know, I definitely don't think I'm gonna lift the scooter from this rack, but whenever you put items on this rack, it kind of mostly concentrates the force at the top and where these 2 suction pups are. So the last thing, since you're all installed, you maybe get your lights all on. You may want to go outside, have somebody sit on the scooter with it off the center stand, and you do you have some options to aim the lights. You don't want it to be blinding everybody. And then you could just tighten the bolts right here. Kind of get them in an ideal aim where it's not blinding oncoming traffic. So just like that, got a new set of extra running lights, kind of light the way at night. And it adds for kind of a completely different look with the rally lights on your Vespa. Meep, meep. I'll see you in the next one. Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com.